Welcome to Psychology of the Daf. We are in Gemara Pesachim on Daf Tzadeh. Can a robot ever replace a Rav? Can a Watson-style artificial intelligence know enough halacha to render Pesachim? One day soon, we're going to be confronted with such a situation. Let's study a recent man versus machine situation. The Gemara on Amud Aleph quotes a pasuk from Shmos Perek Yud Beis, pasuk Daled, Im Yimat Habayis Miyos Miseh, which roughly translates as if the house is too small in number to fully consume the lamb of the Korban Pesach. Now, there's a fabulous story about the Steipler Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita, and actually it's a story within a story. The Steipler's Talmud, Rav Yitzchak Ohev Tzion, read a story about his Rebbe in a leaflet, and in that story that he read, it said that someone once approached the Steipler and asked him, how many times is the word Moshe in the Torah? On the spot, the Steipler Rav responded decisively, 612. The Jew asked him, but Kvod Rav, I checked the computer, and it turned out that there are 614 times. The Steipler Rav said, the computer's wrong. The man wondered, how could the computer be wrong? And Rav Chaim explained, you asked the computer to look up the word Moshe, but you didn't use vowels. You used the letters Mem, Shin, He. Now, actually, the word Moshe appears 612 times in the Torah. The combination of letters Mem, Shin, He occur 614. One is this pasuk we saw today, Im Yimat Habayis Miyos Miseh, Mem, Shin, He. And the other one is found in Dvarim, Perek Tesvav, pasuk Yud Beis, Zedvar Shmita Shamot Kol Bal Mashe Yodo. Basically, Shmita abrogates any creditor that is coming after the person. Okay, now, after reading the story, the Ohev Tzion asked the Steipler if the story was in fact true, because he said that I know the Rav really doesn't know anything about technology or about how computers work. In fact, one time when you were in the Mayin HaYeshua Medical Center many years ago, a doctor wanted to make life easier for you and showed you a computer with a Otzar Chachma on it so that you could access any sefer. And you said to your family, of what use is such a device? Every sefer that I need, I know where it is on the shelf, and I can go and get it. Now, it's a little bit hard to understand what the Steipler meant by that. I presume what he meant was that most of the things I remember, and if I want to look something up, I can simply go to the shelf and look it up. Now, there's a lot of different things we can learn from that story, which we'll get to. But the point is that the Rav's Talmud said to him, so, it doesn't look like you really understand how a computer works. And what he meant was because if you would know the value of cross-referencing and be able to check up things in a responsive database and all those other things, you wouldn't have be so unimpressed with the Otzar Chachma device. Anyway, the Steipler Rav answered that he doesn't remember whether the story was true or not, but in fact he does know what a computer is. It was explained to him already. So there's so much we can see from this story. For one thing, it's another iteration in the wonderful collection of man versus machine stories, which go back quite a long time. So John Henry versus the steam drill, or Gary Kasparov's famous rematch against Deep Blue. He lost the first time because he didn't quite yet figure out the weaknesses of the computer strategy. And another thing that we learn from this is, the Rav has a formidable memory and intellect, and despite all that, he didn't remember whether the story happened or not. And that tells you that no matter how great your memory is, you remember things that are relevant, and things that are not relevant, you don't. So to the Steipler Rav, how many times it says Moshe in the Torah was highly relevant. Whether or not he met this gentleman and they had this encounter was certainly not very relevant. And, that tells you that even though his mind worked faster than a computer and arguably even more accurate than a computer, he still didn't remember things that were not of importance to him. A final matter, and this is an important one, is that no matter how you're going to look at this story, clearly the Rav's relationship and understanding of technology was quite limited. And whoever is going to ask a shaila of the Rav is utterly dependent on the mediators to explain to him the technology that's being discussed, and how that's given over, and whatever associations and context and current context and consensus reality is completely dependent on the unconscious and conscious biases of the mediator. Now think for a minute how you might explain an iPhone to somebody from 100 years ago. Well, you'd say something like this. Well, it's like a phone, like a telegraph, only you can talk from very far distances, one person to another. Also, just by the way, you can have any book and all the books ever printed on it, like the entire Shas. And just by the way, you also could look up any perverse, disgusting image that was ever found in the universe on there. I don't know if that does the subject justice, but that's the whole point. How can a psak be rendered about something that is almost impossible to describe unless you experience it? So once again, we find in the annals of man versus machine, there are many errors and much that can go wrong.